Consider x squared minus 6x plus 10 and consider the graph of y equals x squared minus 6x plus 10. The number in front of x squared is 1, which is a positive number. This tells us that the curve is this shape, sometimes referred to as a happy curve. If it's this shape, there must be a lowest point on the curve, and this is referred to as a minimum point. The completed square form here for x squared minus 6x plus 10 gives us the coordinates of this minimum point. If we look at this bracket, we change the sign here, giving us 3. And we keep the sign the same here, giving us 1. So we know that 3, 1 is the minimum point for this curve. The original form here gives us the y-intercept. The number on its own is the y-intercept. Since we know the general shape of the curve and know it's symmetric, we can now produce a sketch which shows the minimum point. Just as an aside, and not necessarily something you're expected to know here, but note how this curve does not touch the x-axis. We've met this curve before. The fact it doesn't touch the axis tells us that x squared minus 6x plus 10 equals 0 has no solutions. The solutions to a quadratic equation where it's equal to 0 gives the coordinates of the points where the curve cuts the x-axis. And here, this curve does not cut the x-axis. Now consider x squared plus 4x plus 1. Note the number in front of the x squared is a 1, which once again is a positive number, telling us that we would have a happy curve. The completed square form tells us the coordinates of the minimum point, -2, -3. Remember, we changed the sign on the x, but not on the y. So we have -2, -3 as the minimum point for this curve. The 1 gives us the intercept on the y-axis. Remember, that's the number on its own in the original form. Since we know the shape of the curve, we can now produce a sketch. Now for minus x squared minus 4x plus 6, the number in front of the x squared is -1, which is a negative number. This tells us that the curve is this way up, often referred to as a sad curve. The number on its own in original form tells us it cuts the y-axis at 6. The completed square form tells us the top of the curve is at -2 and 10. Note the signs. So -2, 10 is the top of the curve. We know the shape, so we can produce the sketch. The highest point on the curve is known as the maximum point. Now consider this one. The number in front of x squared is a positive number, so we know that we get a happy curve. The plus 5 tells us we cut the y-axis at 5. The 2 makes no difference to our analysis of the minimum point. It's at -1 and 3. So here's the minimum point at -1, 3, and we know the shape of the curve, so we can produce the sketch. Note that quadratic curves are always symmetric. Therefore, the vertical line through the minimum point is always a line of symmetry of the curve.